Uh-oh, I see that I've gotten some messages that we had no sound. Okay, my friends, welcome back. We're gonna kick this off once again. Thank you guys for typing into the chat that the audio was gone. Um, and yes, Tai Chi with ginseng. I was wondering why there was a sad face on the reaction pane. Welcome, welcome, dear friends. I am Dr. 1Dreah Pennington, and I am the publisher and founder of Make Your Mark Global. So good to have you folks here today. So sorry for our technical glitch. I am here celebrating the launch of the top 10 traits of highly resilient people. It is the second edition of this book, and I am super, super excited to say that a month ago it went on sale for pre-orders, and now as of today you will start getting downloads if you ordered it as an ebook, and it will start shipping worldwide. So thank you for tuning in and sticking with me through this. We're super excited because we have got some authors who have shared very vulnerable personal stories about how they've endured certain trauma or drama in life and bounced back. And many of them have even bounced forward with post-traumatic growth. So I'm super excited because this book was co-authored by Dr. Elsa Reagan, one of our wonderful co-authors. In addition, we have stories by Kenny Bay, Gegga Birgis, Dr. Lizzie Bernthal, Sarah K. Brandis, Catherine Callahan, Amy Davis, Busi Dolodo, Susan Edwards, Julia Farmer. Hey, Julia, I saw you typing in. Ginseng Gray Tillman, Doctor of Physical Therapy, Rob Goddard, Homani, Derry Llewellyn Davies, Joyce Petra Melendez, Julia Monroe, Melissa Neff, PhD, Ruth Owen, yours truly, and Joanna Soares, Kaya Skosana, Jeff Sutherland, Jelu Truta, and Anne Marie Wersch. Super, super exciting, right? So the first time we published this book, we had some different stories by different authors, and it was in January of 2020, and the book instantly became a bestseller because the pandemic hit, and then people were like, how do I bounce back after this craziness? And the good news is resilience is this capacity that you were born with. We each have an innate ability to bounce back or come back to a baseline after trauma, drama, illness, surgery, accidents, a pandemic. We each have this innate ability to return to a baseline and recover. We also have the ability to thrive, but if you're not embracing or embodying some of these resilience traits, you might find yourself on the low side, whether that's PTSD or some other challenges. What we're really aiming to do is to arm you with the skills and the inspiration to bounce back and to maybe even bounce forward with post-traumatic growth. Sound exciting? Yes? Awesome. So you may have heard that we are also giving away a signed copy of this book. All you need to do to enter is either visit my website, andreapennington.com, and you can sign up for one of our newsletters there. Everyone who enters into that newsletter form will be entered to win a signed copy of the book. Alternatively, you could submit a question. So, do you have a question for me or for one of our authors that I could pose to one of them? You can type it into the chat. I'm going to give you all of the 10 traits. So if you have a question about one of them, type it into the chat. And the most interesting, thought-provoking question, the person who enters that will be entered to win the free copy of the book. So stick around for that. The other thing you can do is share this broadcast. Share this link on LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube so that you can get other folks to join. And make sure you tag me at Dr. 1Dreah Pennington, and we will see. We will see who's going to win. So lovely to have some of you here. Valencia, who is one of the authors of our other book that's coming out. I see you here. Hey, Chrysanthellus, lovely to have you here. Julia Farmer, Wonderful to have you. You're in the book. And Kathy Hill, who's also in our Sacred Medicine book. Awesome. Great to have you here. And Allison Conler, my BFF from childhood. So lovely for you to tune in. Can't wait to see you in a month and a half or so. Awesome. So, do you have questions? Please type them into the chat. So, are you curious to know what are these 10 traits of resilience? Well, the number one resilience trait is insight. That is self-awareness or emotional intelligence. We have two stories in this chapter. One, you know what's going on. It's Mercury retrograde. What are you going to do? So I was just talking about resilience trait number one. The first story in the first chapter of the top 10 traits of highly resilient people is by Kaya Skosana from South Africa. And when we're talking about this resilience trait of emotional intelligence and insight, we're talking about, do you know yourself? Do you know your stress triggers? Do you know what is good and strong with you? Are you even aware of the narrative that you have going on in your mind? And with Kaya's story, he really sheds a light on how insidious our internal programming can be, like all the way from childhood into our 30s and 40s. That story that you tell yourself is literally driving everything in your life, your finances, and your relationships. So I think you'll be really inspired because in Kaya's story, he really does like a 180-degree turn and shift to embracing his authentic self. So definitely check out his chapter in the top 10 traits of highly resilient people. And our next story in the book is called Listening to My Body's Wisdom by Dr. Melissa Neff, who also does neurofeedback out in Montana, which I think is super cool because I love neurofeedback. But what's really interesting about Melissa's story is, once again, is this, are we aware of, or do we have insight into what's going on inside of us? Her body was giving her clues that needed a little bit deeper investigation, not just on the surface. And through a kind of long and extensive medical workup and investigation, she finally found a way to tune in and listen to the body. And I think her story as well will really inspire you, particularly if you know that there's something going on in your body and it probably has a link to your emotions or to past trauma. Like, all of that is impacting your resilience. So definitely check out this first section of the top 10 traits of highly resilient people to learn how you can build this resilience trait of emotional intelligence. The next chapter in the book is all about resilience trait number 2, which is flexibility and adaptability. And the story in this chapter by Dr. Elsa Regan is My Healing Motherhood Journey. Now this one, I'm going to say right up front, is a tearjerker, and it hit me in my heart when I first connected with this beautiful author. But it's so inspiring because even when we are going through the most challenging of things, if we can learn to be flexible and adaptable, yeah, I know, like we think that we have this perfect roadmap for our future, and especially when it involves our children. But sometimes you have to be flexible. You've got to find a new way to create joy and connection. And Elsa's story is definitely one that will shock you, and in a good way, to really show you the power of resilience, that maybe all parents have it. Maybe it's a mom thing, but I know that we all have this human ability. And I'm really excited because Elsa will be joining us in New York for the book signing in New York City this July. So I would love it if you would come out and hang with us. So we will be in New York City on July 2nd for a book signing and some presentations by some of our authors in this book, as well as in Sacred Medicine. Super cool because the week before I will be leading a workshop on resilience and self-love at the Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York. So I would love to have you there. I know Elsa would love to meet you in person and maybe even sign a copy of the book for you. So definitely check us out. that is what's going on with chapter 2 of the top 10 traits of highly resilient people. Chapter 3 is all about persistence. Have you ever had a goal? Whether that was a financial goal, or you wanted to get a degree, or get a house, or get out of debt, or maybe to meet the love of your life, but somehow along the way you gave up on yourself. Maybe you lost hope. Maybe the obstacles coming at you seemed too great. Well, resilience trait number 3 is persistence. And the 3 stories that we have in this chapter will definitely inspire you. The first is Persistence to Peace. This is a story by Susan Edwards that will inspire you because at an advanced age, Susan really came to terms with how persistence was really helping her all her life, but in particular to deal with personal loss as she was aging. So definitely check out Persistence, chapter 3 in this book, if you find that you too have given up hope in certain ways. The next story in this chapter is called The Power Within by Kenny Bay. And he almost got into the chapter about emotional intelligence and insight because he really had to be insightful to dig deep to find that power within. But ultimately, Kenny's story about persistence is all about him not settling for a mediocre life. He always felt deep in his heart that he was meant for something big. And he'd had a couple of stumbles in life, some setbacks, some obstacles, and found himself almost giving into a pity party until he really decided to do the deep work. So what I love about the stories in this book is that they give you like a bird's eye view of what it's like to live each and every one of these resilience traits. Because most of us, we say resilience, and it just, for many people, it just makes you think that you're kind of strong or tough. But resilience is actually quite nuanced. So I think you'll enjoy this story by Kenny Bay, The Power Within. And the next story in the chapter on persistence is called The 12 Steps of a Discovering Adult Child by Anne-Marie Wersch. So I love this story because I have also been in that position of becoming a recovering adult child. The adult child of a dysfunctional family or an alcoholic parent often finds themselves in adulthood reacting like a child. We could describe a former US president as being an adult child. But what if you could actually see the 12 steps and learn how to apply them so that you could persist, so that you could move forward, healing your inner child and becoming your own loving parent? Well, this story by Anne-Marie will inspire you. And as always, at the end of each chapter, there are exercises, there are journal prompts, there are links to guided meditations that will help you build up this persistence trait. All right? I'm going to pop over and see if there's any questions in the chat. And Ginseng says she plans to be with us in New York City. Woohoo! So looking forward to seeing folks in person. Yes, the launch has finally come. Good to have you here, Kaya. Thank you for the congratulations. All right, let's see. And yes, it's a privilege to have you with us, Lizzie. So good to have you. All right, so if you have a question, type it into the chat because this is one of the ways that you can win a signed copy of the book. All right, today we are celebrating the 24 authors who have contributed to the top 10 traits of highly resilient people. And I would love for you to get to know chapter 4. It's all about tolerance and compassion. Did you know that having self-compassion actually makes you more resilient? I thought totally the opposite. In my early career, in my 30s, I was like a go-getter. I was a type A, aggressive, perfectionistic person. And in my way of thinking, it was either perfect or shit. Sorry, excuse my language, but that's kind of the way I operated. And so the idea of being compassionate to myself, of being able to tolerate less than 100%, was really, really hard. Until I learned that compassion actually gives us more capacity to see new ways of getting to our goal. Compassion also gives us the capacity to look at the negative things with a little bit more gentleness instead of beating ourselves down. And this tolerance and this compassion helps us to pick ourselves back up. And so there are 3 stories in this chapter on tolerance and compassion. One is by Julia Farmer, and it's called Always in My Heart. This one was also one of those really touching stories that just demonstrates the power of resilience as a human trait. And Julia's story, she also endured some pretty heavy losses, devastating losses, and was also challenged with a heart condition that kept kind of showing up in the most stressful situations. When you read her story, I think you'll also be surprised to see how we can actually embrace compassion while we're going through the most horrific things in our lives. And that can give us the fuel to keep going, to keep living, and to bounce forward. My dear friend and artist, Gegga Birgis, who wrote Smiler Can Change It All, she also contributed a chapter in this book called The Silent Lion. And Gegga was a little bit like me, super hard on herself, a little bit on the perfectionistic side. And she talks about what it was like being in the hospital ward. In addition to being an artist, she's a nurse and a midwife, and working at this psych ward and seeing these patients just being given pill after pill after pill. And she was realizing something is wrong here. She had a little bit of a blow up, a little bit of a crash, as she puts it in her words, but ultimately she was able to bounce back and actually bounce forward. And it required a whole heap of compassion. So I think you'll enjoy her story as well. And also in this chapter on tolerance and compassion is a story by me. It is a reprint from the first edition, and I'm sharing the story about how I recovered from caregiver burnout. It was definitely all about compassion, or the metta meditation, that really, really saved me. And caring for my mother, who had Alzheimer's at the time, was stressful, of course. And it was one of those things that kind of snuck up on me because I was in a little bit of rescuer savior mentality without recognizing it. Yeah, that's lacking resilience trait number 1, insight. But ultimately, when I was at my burnout point with looking after my mom, it was the compassion meditation, also known as metta or loving kindness, that really turned things around for me and allowed me to practice self-care. So if you have experienced burnout, if you're in burnout, if you've recovered and you want to prevent burnout, definitely check out this chapter, because tolerance and compassion would not be the things you'd think of to recover from burnout, but they are absolutely necessary. In chapter 5, we cover the resilience trait of optimism. Having an optimistic outlook on your life, on your situation, can be really hard, but it is one of those things that helps to fuel our energy and our motivation to keep going. We have 2 stories in this chapter. One is called Hope for the Hopeless by Dr. Jeff Sutherland. And once again, you will be shocked to hear the devastating news that Jeff received. As a healthy, thriving physician, his own health was put at risk, and ultimately he received a diagnosis that did not bode well for him in his practice, but somehow he was able to dig deep and find hope. He's also written a full memoir on this, as well as given a TED Talk, but the story that he shares here in the top 10 traits of highly resilient people will definitely inspire you and show you how you can also stoke optimism even in the midst of health challenges. And Every Challenge is Worth It is a story by Ruth Owen that will also inspire you to see that even when things look completely bleak, there is reason for hope. There is reason for optimism. As we move to chapter 6, We're at resilience trait number 6, and this is the trait of confidence and self-efficacy. So our doctor of physical therapy, Ginseng Ji, also wrote a story called Alchemy of Courage, and she was able to really dig deep to find the courage to keep moving forward. And ultimately, her story is about reflecting on what are your strengths, right? Because sometimes when we're in the midst of turmoil, we can focus on the negative and feel hopeless. But stoking confidence and having that sense of self-efficacy requires you to look at what's right about you. And her story demonstrates that really well. A story by Catherine Callahan is called Found in Translation. And whoa, we just talked about being in a psych ward. Imagine if you were locked up in a psych ward and then started speaking a foreign language and couldn't get out. Yeah, that's a little bit about what Catherine endured. Ultimately, she found herself in the translation of the language she was speaking and connected with other women and found the confidence to stay the course. She made it out of that psych ward, and her story will inspire you. And then there's a story by Amy Davis called Your Money or Your Life. And this one is also a heartbreaker because we're reading about a woman who was basically swindled in a Ponzi scheme and lost pretty much everything. And as a single woman with children living on the French Riviera, she was really at her wit's end. And just when you think it can't get any worse, there was more stuff piled onto her. But once again, it was about finding the confidence within to surmount all of that and move forward for herself and for her children. So definitely, I think you're going to enjoy this story, Your Money or Your Life, in Chapter 6. Chapter 7 is Resilience Trait 7, which is positive self-talk. And yes, you need positive self-talk if you're going to be resilient, if you're going to bounce back or even bounce forward in life. You got to put that inner critic to the side and nurture your inner cheerleader. 2 stories in this chapter. One is called Seeing My Future by Dr. Joana Soares. And this lovely author from Portugal, who's also contributed to Time to Rise, she went completely blind in this sort of strange, bizarre diagnosis, and yet was able to tune into positive self-talk to get her through one of the most scary things that could ever happen to a young woman. Her story is going to inspire you because just when you think, of course, you have total reason to have a total pity party, she was only in her early 30s and all of a sudden couldn't see, couldn't, practice veterinary medicine. Her story is going to inspire you to see that you can turn things around. It all works together. There's not one thing. This is one of 10 traits, but it's definitely an important one. And also in this chapter is Stepping Off the Tarmac by Dr. Lizzie Bernthal. And this one is really a good story because you'll hear about how Lizzie was in the military, serving in this medical mission, and really faced with a decision like, do I go through with this? And being torn because she was leaving her children and thinking, this could be the mission that I don't even come home. But it was positive self-talk. It was a positive self-narrative that helped her get through this. And I know that you're going to be inspired by this story as well. Chapter 8 is all about resilience trait number 8, which is connection to positive people. It is true, if you have a bunch of negative people in your life, you are more likely to give in to negativity when stress or drama hits. So you have to stay connected to positive people. The first story in this chapter is called To Survive and Thrive by Julia Monroe. And this one, I could really give just sort of a disclaimer for the whole book. You're going to read some stories that will hit you in the heart. And Julia, when she shares some of the trauma and abuse that she endured early in life, and then it seems like drama was just being stacked on her up into her, early adulthood, and almost losing everything that you could imagine that you hold dear, like a husband, all of your money. And yet she found that a connection to a positive person or 2 or 3 really helped her to survive and eventually turn it around and thrive. Hopefully you'll get to see Julia in a video at some point, because you would never guess that she's endured all that she has. But she is truly resilient, and part of it is thanks to a connection to positive people. And then we have a story by Romanian author Gelu Truta. His story is called How Angels Helped Me Quit Smoking. And this one is super cool because typically when we think of resilience trait 8, this connection to positive people, we mean like, people here on earth. But couldn't it be just as valid to have a connection to a being on the other side of the veil? Whether that's an angel or an ancestor, a saint, who knows? But if you read this story, you'll find out how amazing it is that Gelu was able to quit a long, decades-long history of smoking cold turkey with the help of some angels. And then we have a story by Rob Goddard called From Suicide to Success. Rob also shared a full book called From Suicide to Success, and he's stepped on stage with me here in France and in England. And Rob's story is about his connection to an angel that he calls Alex. Well, that's what Alex's name is. His angel is somebody on the earth who saved him from taking his own life. So this chapter will definitely show you that you might be that positive person. You might be that angel for someone else. But it will also remind you that you can look out for these angels, these connections that can make your life worth living and keep you resilient. Resilience trait number 9 is positive emotion. So that's kind of a tough one. When you're going through stress or drama and turmoil, the idea of remaining positive can seem very difficult. But as you'll read in this chapter, the research by Barbara Fredrickson on her broaden and build theory says every micro moment of positive emotion is like depositing positivity into our resilience bank account. It broadens our ability to problem solve and to see new solutions. In this chapter, we have a story by Sarah K. Brandis called The Doing Trap and Learning to Feel. She endured some pretty intense abuse in her early childhood and literally escaped. She also wrote a book about this, an entire memoir about becoming emancipated from her family and becoming an elective orphan. I think Sarah's story is inspiring because getting out of an abusive, toxic household and then finding a way to learn to re-feel emotions. Like, as you could imagine, growing up in trauma and drama, you don't want to feel. Like, we learn to numb out or dissociate. And with her learning to feel, she learned how to tune into positive emotion and remain resilient. And if you follow her on Instagram, then you already know she's this amazing marathon runner, and she's always doing videos and helping to inspire people. So I think you'll enjoy that. Our last chapter in the book, resilience trait number 10, which is purpose and meaning in life. Did you know that if you were to retire and you felt like you had no purpose, your risk of mortality is actually increased? Yes, there have been studies done on this, including the Midas study, the midlife in the US. Carol Riff did studies on this, as well as many other researchers who validated this in the United States, in Japan, and they found that in Japan, where people talk about ikigai, which translates to purpose in life, people who feel like they have a reason for getting up in the morning tend to have better health. It's as if finding meaning or a reason to live boosts all of your vitality and keeps you moving forward. In this chapter, we have a story by Derry Llewellyn Davies called Purpose-Led Resilience. And he talks about how he had a driving purpose, and that was to make it down Mount Everest. Yes, he was on Mount Everest in 2015 when that earthquake struck that took out thousands of people. And he was at a point where he thought he might have been stranded and had to find a way to keep moving, even though people were starting to get altitude sickness and so on. So definitely turning into purpose-led resilience for Derry was the key, and I know it'll inspire you as well. And then we have a poem by Homani. Homani decided to give a sequel to a poem called The Star Money and really tuned into a very creative way for finding resilience. And that is through using creativity in a purposeful way. So this is the only poem that we have in this book, and I think you'll enjoy it. And our next story is by Joyce Petra Melendez. She is a Dutch author who wrote You Are the Key to Set Yourself Free. And Joyce talks about how she had a very traumatic accident as a little girl on her bicycle. And that led to shutting down a whole lot of herself and her energy and feeling like she was trapped inside. And then she found the key to set herself free, and she's actually turned it into her own modality for helping people identify their blocks and to get set free. So you'll get a little taste of her transformative method by reading this chapter that's all about purpose and meaning in life. And then our final story in the book is by Busi Delodlo, and it's called Purpose Driven Goals. And once again, we are just inspired to look at life even when it seems stark and bleak and find some goal that's meaningful to you to move toward. And that, we know it gives us that little dopamine hit to like motivate ourselves. That can be part of your resilience recipe. All right? So these are the 10 traits of resilience. These are the stories that are featured in the book. And in the appendix, I've actually included an excerpt from my book, the Real Self-Love Handbook. I've included an excerpt on the attunement meditation because so many of our authors recommend meditation. I recommend meditation, and I lead people in a guided meditation each month. I gave an excerpt from the Real Self-Love Handbook so that you could learn how to use these 5 steps to bring calm to your body and brain, to bring harmony and resonance from your heart throughout your body. And going through this 5-step meditation will help you as you're doing these exercises to build resilience. So, doesn't that sound awesome? Don't we have some wonderful authors to hear from? How exciting is this? All right, so I'm going to pop over to the chat and see what you guys have been saying. Yes. So, inspiring stories. Can't wait to read and integrate. Absolutely, Valencia. Absolutely. It feels really great. You have a very flexible, practical mind. That's why I like you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. I don't know how to pronounce your name because it's in another language there, but cool. Julia, you are most welcome. So happy to have you in the book. You as well, Lizzie and Lisa. Thank you for tuning in. Glad to know that resilience is one of your favorite topics. Yes, Ikigai, purpose and meaning in life. Julia says, yes, I believe that purpose is fundamental to resilience. It keeps you focused forwards. Yes, instead of being stuck in the past. Yes, you are such an inspiration, Julia. Thank you so much. Finding meaning in suffering, in pain, says Lisa, can actually make the adversity bearable. Yep, indeed. And we have the beautiful artist, Sandra D., who's in our other book called Sacred Medicine that's coming out as well. Actually, Sacred Medicine is on pre-order as of today. So hasn't this been awesome to hear a little overview of each of the chapters in the top 10 traits of resilience? And I haven't seen any questions coming in. If you want to win a free copy of the book autographed by me, then the way that you can enter to win is to sign up on my website. You can visit the website and enter by subscribing to the newsletter. Sorry, I'm trying to do multiple things at once. Visit AndreaPennington.com and you'll see that you can enter to win by joining the newsletter. You can also submit a question here, and the most interesting question will be chosen to enter for the free giveaway. And the other thing is, if you have shared this broadcast, the link to the Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, if you're sharing that and you tag me at Dr. 1Dreah Pennington, I will see that when the broadcast is over, and you will be entered to win a signed copy of the book. So thank you for tuning in. This has been really fun to share what each of these authors has been so busy doing. I take people through a writing workshop that allows people to learn how to use the hero's journey as your framework for telling your personal story. It works really well for TED Talks as well. And what people find out is when they come to this writing workshop, they think, okay, I'm going to learn how to tell stories. But really, it ends up being an incredibly transformative process because you're learning to tune into your own story and find your voice. You might be sharing a story that you've never told anyone, and finding that safety in the community of our author circle and then sharing it in print liberates you. I think it was you, Kaya, that said that you are completely liberated from the past story that you used to tell yourself. And that is just, it's a gift. It's a gift. And I'm super, super honored to have been your guide and your mentor to all of these beautiful authors. We've had hundreds of people go through this life writing process, learning to tell stories using the hero framework, and then some of them have gone on to publish their own books. So people that we've had in Time to Rise, Manifesting Love, Top 10 Traits of Resilience, Life After Trauma. So we've had 2 Dutch authors that published a single story in the book and then went and published their own book with us at Make Your Mark Global. So Dr. Leslie van Oostenbrugge, she published a book with us called Emotional Alignment is Easy. And that was after sharing her first story with us in one of our group anthologies. And then Joyce Wazir Ali also shared a story in one of our books, Magic and Miracles, up here. And after that, we published her solo book called Unity Conscious Leadership from a Buddhist Perspective. So super exciting. This can be a liberating process. Kaya also self-published a book in a professional domain of accounting for physicians. He's a chartered accountant in South Africa. So these writing workshops are not just about the technical stuff. It's about really tuning in to your right to be heard. And yes, Sandra D., the Life Writing Workshop is a life changer. Thank you so much. So I saw a question come in here. All right, Lisa says, how do you teach or inspire resilience into a parent experiencing dementia or Alzheimer's to give them a sense of purpose? Lisa, that's a really great question. Well, you'll see in my chapter, in my story, in the Top 10 Traits of Highly Resilient People, I talk about my experience being a caregiver to my mother who had Alzheimer's. And, I think the most important thing that I've found with dealing with dementia is trying to make every day as memorable as it can be. I'm a firm believer that our souls are always present. Even if the brain starts to decline in its function, I tell a story about my daughter and I taking my mom to get ice cream. And I'll let you read that in the book. But for me, what I found was giving them a sense of purpose. It could be getting through breakfast or getting through a book or going for a walk in the garden. It's almost like, since with Alzheimer's, you're going backwards, almost back to a childlike state. I find that if you think of them as children, do you remember how a child could just get so fascinated by seeing a candle or seeing something light up? And it's like bringing that childlike wonder back to a person with Alzheimer's. And that's giving them a sense of meaning. And the meaning for many of us is to find a tiny moment of joy or a tiny moment of ease or laughter or recognition. And that can be that little glimmer of purpose that keeps you going throughout the day. Yes, and Kaya says, stories with soul. Yes, was the course that helped with that. The power of the narrative. Yep, Stories with Soul is one of my favorites, and I love teaching that workshop. We have taught it in person in France as well as online. And yeah, I love teaching people how to use the hero's journey to look at your own life and become more of the hero, like really getting aligned to your hero self. Yeah. So thank you all for tuning in. I just want to remind you that you can also check out on Amazon or your favorite book retailer, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, whatever, W.H. Smith, Waterstones, wherever you are in the world, you can find the top 10 traits of highly resilient people. The second edition is this color. The first edition, let's see if I can show you how the first edition looked. It's blue. Blue and yellow was the first edition of the top 10 traits. So now when you're on your book retail site, make sure you look for this pinky purple and blue one, and you'll see that my name is changed to 1Dreah instead of 1Dreah. And check out the book. Get yourself the Kindle or the ebook or the print version. And stay tuned, because we will also be celebrating the other group of authors who came through the writing workshop for our next book, which is called Sacred Medicine: Exploring the Psychedelic Hero's Journey. It is a transformative journey through sacred medicine practices and shamanic rituals. That is a really wonderful book as well, and that will be out next month. It is available for pre-order right now. Wow. Well, thank you for sticking with me despite our technical challenges. That was a little bit of a bummer, but I'm super, super grateful that you've been here and that you were able to celebrate with me some of our wonderful authors. I'm so proud of them. If you're still tuning in, my authors, just know that you really are amazing. You have inspired me. You have, you've inspired me. You've just made me really, really proud as an author, as a publisher, as a mentor. I'm super, super grateful that you were so open and honest in sharing your stories. And for those of you who are buying copies, please note that the royalties from this book, the authors are actually donating to a charity. We will announce which charity very soon, but you're not only supporting yourself by learning about these resilience traits, but you're also supporting charity. So it's been a heartwarming experience. Once again, big thanks and applause for my amazing authors who are just awesome. You guys really, bravo. I'm really proud of you. So my friends, please know that no matter where you are in this world, no matter what's going on in your life, you were born resilient. These 10 traits of resilience are within you. They might be buried, but you can dust them off, you can strengthen them, and you can thrive. Remember that you are a gift to the world. So share your presence with passion. Much love, everyone. Take good care. See you.